Real quick before we start, I just wanted to plug my last video. It's an hour and 20-minute video retrospective where I share my thoughts on everything within Age of Calamity, like the story, the gameplay, etc. I usually don't do this, but I worked really hard on it, so I just wanted to give it a little more exposure. Alright, that's it. Thanks guys. So for those of you who don't know, last Wednesday in their most recent direct, Nintendo announced some DLC that is coming to Age of Calamity. The trailer for it wasn't very long, and most of it was just some cutscenes from the game with a Terraco/Sheikah filter over it, but we did get a small snippet of Terraco being examined by Robbie and Pura, as well as a quick shot of some research notes, before we cut to this end info screen here. So because we didn't get much info, I thought I'd make a quick video speculating on what exactly is even in this DLC, since all we are told about it is in some quick bullet points here, and these don't even reveal that much information. So to start things off with this first section here, it just pretty much describes the purchase bonus which will be available on May 28th, which will give us both a new weapon and outfit for Link. I'm not too certain what either of these could be, but if you do remember when Age of Calamity first released, the pre-order weapon bonus was the Lucky Ladle and the Breath of the Wild bonus was the Training Sword. So I doubt that this weapon will actually be something really good, and probably just more of a joke weapon like the other two. They could make a brand new weapon like they did with the Training Sword, or they could also add a Breath of the Wild weapon that still isn't in this game yet. We're still missing all of the ancient weapons, amiibo, and elemental weapons, but I think that they may be saving these for some other purpose which may be revealed later on. So it's probably more likely we just get a new random one-off weapon that's similar to the Training Sword or the Lucky Ladle. As for the outfit, we are still missing all of the amiibo armor, the Breath of the Wild DLC armor, and the ancient armor set. Out of those three, I think we will most likely be getting the ancient armor, especially if we get a certain playable character, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Moving on now to the second section there, which describes Wave 1, which is coming in June of 2021, which is sadly quite a ways away, but in that new wave we will be getting an expanded roster, newly added weapon types, new challenges, and new enemies. For the roster, I think it's pretty much a lock that we'll be getting Pura and Robbie in this first wave, since they are both heavily featured in the trailer and in the artwork. As far as their movesets, I think that Pura will most likely have hers revolving around the Sheikah Slate, since Zelda no longer needs it, and if you take a close look at the artwork you can see that Pura is the one who's holding it. Her moveset could end up being very similar to Sheikah Slate Zelda's, but just a little stronger as Pura is more knowledgeable about it. We might also see some new functions for the Sheikah Slate too, since Pura and Robbie seem to be working on it in the trailer, and hopefully Pura can utilize new abilities in combat like the teleportation feature, or other things she may have discovered in her work. Also, because she does use the Sheikah Slate, she'll most likely have all of her runes recharge faster like Sheikah Slate Zelda did. Robbie I think will be a little more interesting, and I highly doubt he'll also be using the Sheikah Slate since Pura will most likely be getting it, and having another character with a moveset like that will be kind of redundant. I do have a strong feeling that they were saving all of the ancient weaponry to be used in Robbie's moveset rather than just giving him the Sheikah Slate. We know these weapons are going to be coming most likely in this first wave, as in the trailer we see the design of an ancient short sword on the wall. And since Link already has so many weapon types to already choose from, I think it would make perfect sense to let Robbie use these weapons, since he was the one who actually designed them. I have no idea what his fighting style would be like though, since he isn't a knight or anything like that, but I think it'll be more of a strategic playstyle and most likely revolve around him outsmarting his enemies, rather than taking them down with brute force like Link or the other champions. We could also see him get to use the ancient bow and arrows as either a weapon variant or a unique action which would give him a way to clear out enemies from a distance. They have a ton of different ways you can go with this moveset, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with. So we know those two are a lock for the expanded roster, but for the rest, we have no idea what characters and how many we're going to be getting. The OG Hyrule Warriors had 28 characters, and this one has 18, so my best guess is that we will be getting an additional 10 characters to make the two games on par with each other. I think they'll probably split this up evenly in both waves 1 and 2, which means 5 characters in each. And if you also go into the in-game menu and look at the character select screen, it also suggests that 10 new characters will probably be most likely. The character select menu is divided into rows of 4, so if we increase the amount of characters to 28, it will give us 7 rows, which fits in almost perfectly on this screen. So that leaves 3 more characters left in this wave, and if we again look in the base game, I believe it points to these 3 characters being Suga, Aster, and Harbinger Ganon. These 3 along with Robbie and Pura are the only non-playable characters with artwork in the gallery, and they also have descriptions for them, so they're probably the most obvious choices here. This also brings us to 5 characters added in this wave, which works perfectly with my prior theory. These 3 already have movesets in the game as well, as we fight each of them as bosses. Suga uses those double wing cleavers combined with some Giga magic, Aster uses that ancient part ball thing to shoot malice at people, teleport and spawn the hollows, and Harbinger Ganon is pretty much a beefed up Terra Code minus the lasers. They'll most likely all be handled in a similar way to Master Koga, and have their movesets very similar to how you fight them as bosses, but with a couple of added mechanics to make them feel fresh. That's pretty much it from the Wave 1 roster, and I'm almost positive it will be really close or exactly to the characters I chose. The next bullet point details added weapon types, and like I said, we are for sure going to be getting the ancient weapons, and the only question surrounding them is whether they'll be for Link or Robbie. We are also still missing the elemental weapons and arrows, but I think they'll add one of these since having both of them and the elemental rods would be kind of redundant. I think I'm leaning more towards them adding the elemental weapon since I'm not too sure how they'd implement the different arrow types, and I feel like the weapons are easier and just make more sense. I also think it's going to be pretty likely that they add the amiibo weapons like the Fierce Deity Sword and the Sword of Six Sages, since this game already has amiibo functionality, so making these Zelda amiibos give exclusive drops wouldn't be too difficult. Finally, there's also a chance that they create some brand new weapon types to be used by the expanded roster. Suga will have the Wind Cleavers, Aster and Harbinger Ganon will get some Corrupted Guardian parts, and Pyrrha would have the Sheikah Slate attachments. Next up, they also describe some new challenges in the Royal Ancient Lab, and I think they could end up being very similar to the adventure mode in the first game. If you don't know what this was pretty much a mode where you have to complete a bunch of challenges that differ from regular gameplay, like boss rushes or quiz missions, and they'll probably make these challenges the way you could unlock the expanded roster, as well as some other upgrades. I just hope that they make these challenges actually interesting, unlike most of the side quests, and give you a challenging objective rather than just killing X amount of enemies. I don't think that any of these will have any story implications though, as they are labeled as challenges, which makes it sound like they will be more functioning as side quests. And to round out Wave 1, they are going to be adding some new challenging enemies. Throughout the base game, they stuck almost completely to using Breath of the Wild's enemies, and the only ones who have not made an appearance yet have been all of the gold variants, which if you don't know are the toughest enemies you can face. They could also be adding a few unused bosses from Breath of the Wild, like the Moldu King, Titan Taluses, and Guardian Scout variants, but I hope they don't do that and instead introduce some new enemy types for us to fight that are exclusive to this game. I'd rather see them add an additional tough Yiga Clan enemy variant since we only have the Foot Soldiers and Blade Masters to fight. I also doubt they would do this too, but maybe they could add a new monster or boss to make playing through all of these challenges feel a little newer and different from the base game. So that pretty much wraps up everything in Wave 1, so now we'll move on to Wave 2, which is being released in November of 2021, which will make it a full year after the game is released. Wave 2 is going to be pure speculation at this point, since it is so far away and we have almost nothing besides these bullet points to try and guess what they're going to add. So first up we have new character vignettes, and I have honestly zero clue what this even means in this context, and this is really odd wording compared to everything else. So I actually looked it up, and vignettes can be defined as one of two things, either a short story recounting a period of time, or just maybe a short illustration. I doubt that this would be new character artwork, since that would be a really strange thing to highlight in a trailer, so I think I'm leaning more towards these short stories. This could either be updated descriptions like we see in the gallery, maybe some added diary entries from the characters, or it could be added cutscenes to flesh out the stories of each of these characters. Since they put this point at the top of the list, it has to be something that is big and they want to emphasize to us the most. So I think it will be most likely that they will be short cutscenes, telling us more about these characters, similar to how they did in the Champions Ballad DLC. This also ties into the next thing they listed, which was the new stages. Notice that they worded these as stages and not challenges, so I believe they'll have some story implications and could be related to the vignettes in the previous bullet point. Since they have Terco back, I think it might incorporate an element of time travel, where he goes back to witness some events throughout the story that we maybe didn't get to see, which would help flesh it out a little bit more and put some more focus on some of these side characters. It could also be a new post-game where the characters take on new challenges, but with the threat of the Calamity gone, I don't really know how they'd be able to make any interesting or high-stakes stages. Or these stages could have us go all the way back to Chapter 5 and play through a downfall timeline where the heroes lose and we get the ending that leads to Breath of the Wild. This I think would be the coolest choice, but I honestly highly doubt they'd ever go in this direction. Next is the expanded roster, which is thrown on the list now instead of first for some reason, And like I said earlier, they'll probably be adding 5 characters in this wave too. I have zero clue what these 5 characters could even be, as every possible warrior I could think of would have already been added at this point. They might go in more of a silly fanservice direction like they did in the first Hyrule Warriors, as they added characters like Tingle and Medley, who to my knowledge have next to zero fighting experience. So if we pull from the Age of Calamity and Breath of the Wild character list, some possible candidates could be King Gorfan, since we see him fight in that one cutscene, the Deku Tree. I don't even know how this would work, but they could probably figure something out. Cass, who I'd really love to see in this game, Hearth, who is the other Rito warrior next to Teba, Ularia, who is Riju's bodyguard, Bluto, that old Goron who fought Rudania with Yunobo, or they could get really strange and add characters like Paya or Beetle. Alternatively, they could give us different forms to the characters we already have and add young Pyrrha and Sidon or old Robbie. Or they could let us play as the different Blight Ganons or the Calamity Ganon that we saw in Breath of the Wild. But again, I have zero clue what any of these added characters could be, and we'll need to probably wait until maybe a Wave 2 trailer drops later on this year to get some more hints and a little bit more clarification. And our last bullet point is new battle skills for each character. This will probably be additional character upgrade quests that will give all the characters new combos and enhanced abilities to use. If we go back in game and take a look at the character description menu, there's a ton of room to add more enhanced abilities and combos, so I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is what the battle skills will most likely be. But those are all my ideas on what those bullet points could be hinting towards. Outside of them, I think it is safe to say that we will most likely have the character level limit raised, as the max in the first game was 255, so I think in each wave they'll raise it slightly to give us something extra to do. Coming with that, I think it's safe to say they'll also raise the weapon level limit gradually too, so our weapons can progress along with our character level. These two are pretty obvious and easy inclusions, but I also am hopeful for maybe some added seals, as well as maybe a new game mechanic to rival the weapon system. It may be tough to design an entirely new mechanic so late in the game, so that may not happen, but I think at the very least we can get a couple of new seals to play around with. Overall though, I'm pretty excited about the new DLC we're going to be getting, and especially Wave 2 if the character vignettes are what I think they are. It just sucks that we're going to have to wait so long to get both of them, but hopefully with the extra time they can really polish them and make them excellent. In other Zelda related news, they're also releasing Skyward Sword in HD in July, but sadly we got no Breath of the Wild 2 news, so it's starting to become increasingly more unlikely that Breath of the Wild 2 will be coming out this year. And if you look at the DLC release schedule of Age of Calamity, as well as the announcement of Skyward Sword HD, I think Breath of the Wild 2 will probably release sometime in 2022. But let me know what you guys think about the upcoming DLC, and feel free to share your thoughts on what the expansion pass will be bringing to Age of Calamity. Other than that, make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel for more Zelda content. But that's pretty much it, and I'll see you guys later.